The Israeli military has warned Lebanese civilians against returning to dozens of villages in southern Lebanon as troops aim to create a buffer zone to shield northern Israel from Hezbollah attacks. Israel said its forces were maintaining positions in the south in the face of, quote, ongoing terrorist activities by the Iran-backed group, though Hezbollah says it maintains the right to resist Israeli occupation. Thousands of displaced people have begun making their way back to parts of the south since the truce between Israel and Lebanon took effect on Friday. Caroline Baum has more on the situation on the ground.
Despite a fragile ceasefire in Lebanon, Israeli troops on the ground have remained on guard. An Israeli soldier was killed on Friday when he entered a booby-trapped house. On Sunday, the Israeli defense minister said he had instructed his troops to respond with full force if threatened. He also said that the military had orders to destroy homes and villages near the Israeli border, calling them Hezbollah terror outposts.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and I have instructed the IDF to operate with all force, both from the ground and from the air, and during the ceasefire, to protect our lives in Lebanon from any threat.
Hezbollah has also remained wary. On Saturday, the group's leadership instructed displaced people who had fled southern Beirut and the south of the country to wait for their green light before returning home.
The negotiations being conducted by the state do not concern us. They are failed, weak, defeated, and surrender-driven negotiations.
Still, since the 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon went into effect Thursday night, many have been gradually returning to their villages in the south of the country. All too often finding rubble where homes or businesses once stood, like here in Nabatea.
I'm confused about whether to fix my shop or if the bombing will start again. I came to check on it, and I'll wait 10 days. If the truce holds, I'll come back and repair it.
It's a bitter reality playing out across the south of the country, though not all have the option to return. This map, shared by the Israeli Defense Forces, shows areas in Lebanon controlled by the Israeli military. Israel has refused to withdraw troops from the reinforced buffer zone, which stretches 10 kilometers from the Israeli border into Lebanon.
Well, for more on what's happening in Lebanon, we can welcome Nadim Houry, who's the Executive Director of Arab Reform Initiative. Thank you very much for being with us on France 24. I'd like to start by talking about this buffer zone, or security zone as the Israelis are calling it. What are the implications of this on the ceasefire, and is it legal?
So what Israel has now been describing as this yellow line doctrine, which we already saw in Gaza, but also in Syria over the last year and now in Lebanon, basically is a legal excuse, an illegal excuse, I should say, by Israel to use the lingo of self-defense to justify new forms of occupation, which it has done now in Lebanon for about 55 villages. So while it's using it saying, well, this is, that we need to do this to protect ourselves, in fact, what it's doing is actually creating a hierarchy of sovereignty. It's reserving for itself, Israel is reserving for itself the right to decide which Lebanese areas are inhabitable, which, where civilians can go back to or not. And it's illegal on a number of terms. If this is occupied territory, international law on occupation is very clear that you cannot demolish and destroy property, with the exception property that is immediately, represents a security risk. But what we're seeing from the Israelis is intentional demolition and detonation of entire villages without any proof. So really, this is an illegal way of promoting what they call a buffer zone, but what it is in effect is new occupation zones.
And those demolitions of homes in the south that we've been hearing about and seeing, this is after Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, vowed to level homes that were allegedly used by Hezbollah. How is this practice endangering, or how could it endanger the ceasefire?
First, let's just be very clear. the Israeli Minister of Defense is saying that these are homes being used by Hezbollah, but in practice, there's actually no evidence of that. And we've seen footage from Gaza, from Syria, and now from Lebanon, where basically the demolition is for entire villages, right? Even after the fighting is completely done. So this excuse, frankly, does not hold much water under international law. In effect, it is actually a violation of the ceasefire because Israel is using the ceasefire to continue its destruction and demolition of Lebanon, and actually to target as well anyone who gets close to some of these areas. So in effect, they're not respecting the ceasefire, which is similar to what we saw, frankly, between 2024 until March of this year, with the previous ceasefire, where the UN noticed more than 12,000 violations.
And you mentioned this strategy that Israel has applied to Gaza and Syria. Can you break it down for us? What ways in which these are comparable, these strategies?
Yes. So basically, what does this yellow line strategy do in effect? It shifts borders. So in a way, Israel occupies territory, and that's happening in Gaza. It happened in Syria, where in addition to the already occupied Golan Heights, which are considered illegal, after the fall of the Assad regime, Israel expanded its area of occupation. So one is actual physical occupation of terrain. Two, within that area that is where there's occupation, and sometimes you'll have troops on the ground, and others is just sort of a yellow line drawn on a map. Israel gives itself permission to strike, usually from drones or from the air, anyone who actually comes close. It could be a civilian going back to check on their home. It could be a farmer going to work their land. We saw that very, very clearly in Gaza. We saw that in Syria. We're seeing it in Lebanon. So in effect, it's actually a fig leaf for a new form of occupation that we are seeing, which, by the way, is not only against clearly established international norms and laws on conduct of warfare, what we call the Geneva Conventions, or international law related to occupation. In the case of Lebanon, for instance, it's a clear violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the conflict in 2006. And there's no talk of yellow line. The only line that's recognized by the Security Council, including by the US, Israel's big ally, is actually the blue line. And the blue line is actually the real border between, very close to the real border between Lebanon and Israel.
Well, meanwhile, in the background, of course, we have the residents of these areas in southern Lebanon in particular. They have no good option because on the one hand, they have nothing to go back to if they're allowed to go back at all. And, displaced, they can't live their lives. They often don't have adequate shelter, do they?
No, and that's the big tragedy. When Israel had expelled and pushed out about 1.2 million Lebanese. Many of them are very keen to go home for two reasons. One, as you mentioned, they have no good alternative. But the second one is they worry that what Israel calls a temporary occupation ends up being permanent because they have seen what Israel has done in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. They have seen what Israel has done in the Golan Heights. And they've actually heard Israeli ministers, senior Israeli ministers like Smotrich and others, basically talk about the desire to actually settle the land in Lebanon. So they are afraid for their land. They are very tied, attached to their villages, and they want to go back to say, we are not willing to abandon. And we're seeing images right now. I mean, people are taking massive risks to go back, not waiting, because they are worried that what starts as temporary with Israel when it comes to occupation ends up becoming permanent.
And so what then can we expect next with notably these ceasefire talks? We've seen the president just appoint the head of the Lebanese delegation. And can the Lebanese government force Hezbollah to disarm?
Look, I don't see the Lebanese government being able to disarm Hezbollah if Israel continues its occupation of Lebanon. That I just don't see the Lebanese army going in to disarm Hezbollah when Hezbollah says, "Look, there are 55 villages that are occupied." It just defies logic. The only way to disarm Hezbollah is if the Lebanese state, the government, is able to get real guarantees and to see that Israel leaves Lebanese territory, and that the Lebanese state can show that through diplomacy, through its alliances, it can actually force some key concessions from Israel. Then we can see a meaningful process of disarmament. Now, Israel is going to say, well, we will not, leave those villages before Hezbollah disarms. And that is a bit the vicious cycle that Lebanon is stuck in today. But it's going to be very hard to disarm Hezbollah as long as Israeli occupation continues. It just gives very little leverage for the Lebanese state to negotiate with Hezbollah.
All right, Nadim Houry, Executive Director of the Arab Reform Initiative, thank you very much for being with us on France 24. Well, to get a better sense of the realities on the ground in Lebanon, I'm joined in the studio by France 24's Cyril Payen, who's just come back from a reporting mission there last night, in fact. Cyril, give us a sense about this ceasefire. Can it hold? I mean, it's not the first time that Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a truce.
Well, it looks very fragile from the ground perspective, for having spent the past 10 days with the Lebanese in Beirut. But of course, in southern Lebanon, the precarity of this ceasefire is on the table, and from the very first hours of Friday, when just hours after the implementation of this sudden ceasefire between the two countries, there were some skirmishes, there were some reports of strikes, even some battle between the two sides, between Hezbollah and Israel. So everybody knows, and this footage are just clearly shows what happened in the first hours of Friday when you have 1.2, as Nadim was saying, 1.2 million people who are not refugees, because they said to us, we are not refugees, we are from this country, we are just displaced. And you have been living in this country, born in this part of the country. So hundreds of, I would say, like 200,000 or 300,000 of them just went back quickly, but 50% of them went back to Lebanon on the same day, because they have seen the level of destruction first. This buffer zone, this yellow line, because now it's really an official word from the Israeli military strategy, to have a yellow line exactly what is the same strategy in Gaza. Is like if you go a bit close to this yellow line, you're getting shot and killed. So many people were stuck between this ceasefire, which is good news. This was a precondition from the Lebanese government to any negotiations back to what happened a few days ago in Washington. See, in a way, it's diplomatically a win. But on the ground, people just went back because they have no access to many of the villages. And looking at Nabatea, which is the biggest city in the south, it's 100 to 220,000 people living usually here. I've been there many times. It's really the big city in the south. The level of destruction is just amazing that it looks irreversible. This is why these people who have been living under tents, under really, really harsh conditions, just spread all over the country for the past 15 months, they have no choice by returning to their tents, and because the difficulties on the ground are absolutely huge. And again, it looks very much difficult to think it will be at some point reversible.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You know Lebanon well. Do you think that this war is different? It can be a turning point in Lebanon's history?
Decades of occupation, Syria, Israel, civil war, the explosion of the port in the summer 2021. We thought it was the crisis, of course. The Lebanese were used to be resilient. This is a word you can't use anymore in Lebanon. People are very angry with always the international community, the diaspora, people saying from the Lebanese on the ground in the country that they will be resilient and they will move forward. This time, and it looks very much, there is a huge sense of fatigue, the tiredness, which is extremely affecting the people. They are very traumatized. What happened 10 days ago when the Israeli, just a moment before the ceasefire agreed by Tehran and Washington, with the huge strikes all over Beirut, 100 strikes by the Israeli airplanes in less than 10 minutes. This is huge. It was really a commotion, a trauma, and people looks very much like, to me, like this time they don't have they can't even step back just to relax a few minutes, just to think about what they're going to organize themselves, whether they leave the country, whether they stay. It looks like, it's not, maybe the term is not like the war, the war, too many wars. It's like it's too much. And the problem, they know also that what will happen after these negotiations between Iran and America, because they know that this country is just in the middle of something which is bigger than him, and this is the tragedy. And people knows, and there is, again, a very strong fatigue, which is quite new for me. I've been reporting in this country for a few years now. This is the first time I see this sense of tiredness and being really the proxy of something bigger, and nobody really cares. Just back to the ceasefire. There was a ceasefire. I was there in November 24, the 27th of November 24, after weeks of strikes by the Israeli army and fighting with the Hezbollah. The UN reported not 12,000 but 15,400 violations of the ceasefire. This is a UN monitored figure. So when you have this and you ask the Lebanese to come back to their home and this is okay, now we're going to achieve peace, we can understand that they won't believe that much this kind of statement.
Yeah, tell us more about the mood of the Lebanese people. I mean, is there also this feeling of getting caught up in a war that's not theirs?
Very much so, very much so. And there is this spectrum of very tragic trauma of the civil war, which has been really ravaging this country for many years. Now, with this internal displaced people, we are much minority of Shiite from southern Lebanese living in very precarious tents in some areas where Christians are living, Sunnite. There is a sense that the first reaction was to take care of these people, to say we are just brothers and sisters, same country. But when some Christian communities, for instance, took some Shiite minority going to shelter them, and they were bombed by Israel. There is a paranoia which has been spreading all over the community. So a lot of people are worried very much about what could be next, civil war. Maybe the word is a bit excessive, but there is a sense that the community are not the same as they were like a few months ago. It was the real cement of this country. So this is quite sad, tragic, and quite new, I guess.
All right, Cyril Payen, thank you very much for that.